Back in 2019, I worked for a B2B startup marketing company. This company ended up going bankrupt. The founder had a pretty major drug problem, and we couldn't understand if the business was funded by him or his parents. We still don't know to this day. It's a fun story, but also a great lesson. Within this company, right, we had a insane outbound email strategy. We would email thousands of people per week, and that's how we would end up booking calls. I was the podcast manager that turned into the sales guy. And throughout this process, I was working on, in, and around the podcast. The podcast was, quote unquote, my baby within this company. It was me, the founder, another full-time employee, and a group of freelancers. We were bootstrapped and we were just trying to make it happen. The founder of the company brought me in to create the podcast. And here's where it went south. The drug problem, the bankruptcy, none of these things actually took us down in the end. I was brought on to edit the podcast. I ended up editing it, producing it, promoting it, interviewing people, marketing it, end to end, right? And I was young, so I didn't know left from right. I was just trying to learn. I thought all of this was normal. Fast forward 20 episodes in, and I get pulled off the podcast. And I'm like, wait a minute, this doesn't make any sense. Apparently, according to the founder, the podcast wasn't working. Now, fast forward to today, 2024, I know that the podcast wasn't the problem, the founder was the problem. And in many cases, the founder is the problem. And as a founder myself, I know this to be true. And if you're listening and you're a founder or you're a marketer or whether you're the founder or you're under the founder, you're gonna know that this is true often as well. And this isn't bad. Obviously, these things happen, right? You have to learn your lesson. So this founder wanted to pull me off of the podcast, so I was removed, and he said that a podcast simply wasn't working. Now, the major problem was he didn't wait long enough. If you're in a cold email and direct response world, you do not understand how long podcasts take. Let's use this for example. Famous world-renowned YouTuber Ali Abdaal has a course on how to get started with your YouTube channel. On the course, it says, if you're not willing to do this for 2 years, do not even join. And we've seen results much faster. We have clients like Jake, who grew his YouTube channel to 5,000 subscribers, got his podcast episodes with tens of thousands of views in the first 60 days. So we know that there are ways to speed up this process. But when it comes to the results for your business, the key takeaway is that you have to wait and maintain your patience. But the question is, how do you do that? There's a few ways to stay patient in this process because content takes too long. And the first way to do this is through signals. Instead of looking for booked calls or X amount of leads or any of these metrics, instead change your mindset to signals. A signal is somebody mentioning the podcast. Another signal is somebody commenting and talking about your business in general, or just making a comment about working with you. We save all of these things in a Slack channel at Podcast Principles, and all of these are positive signals that keep us going. Sure, we're earning revenue at the same time, we're booking calls at the same time, but it's the qualitative signals that actually mean the most, because this means real people are consuming the content, and it shows and tells us that in the moment. Number two, we have the consistency piece. If you're posting on a predictable schedule, that is how you get predictable results. So when you need to stay patient with a content strategy, like say a podcast or video content or text based on LinkedIn, no matter what it is, the consistency piece is what actually keeps you going. People think it's the other way around. I'm gonna keep going so I can stay consistent. It's you gotta stay consistent so you can keep going. So that consistency piece is basically the number one thing here. And I'll go into this a little bit deeper to create number three, which is instead of consistency, think about it as predictability, right? Instead of saying we need 5 posts per week and 2 podcast episodes per week to maintain our schedule, instead of saying that, say this: the audience needs to know when we are gonna post, when the podcast is coming out, when our next newsletter is going to be rolling out. The audience needs to know. So it's not as much that consistency is the takeaway, it's that you staying consistent will create predictability for the audience. And when the audience has predictability, that's what allows them to come back day after day, week after week, and month after month. So what are we really talking about here? We use words like audience, content, but what it is it's revenue. These people in your audience are revenue waiting to happen. We know this because we sold out a group coaching program in 1 week. We had never offered a group coaching program ever. So there are people in your audience who are waiting for you to give them something, whether it's a high ticket offer, a medium ticket offer, a low ticket offer, in-person, virtual, coaching, consulting, it doesn't matter. What you need to be doing as a business owner, as a founder, or a marketer is creating that consistent content and then building predictability with the audience, so then when you do have the solution for them, or when they have the problem that you solve, you're going to be there. I bet this has probably happened to you many times in business. You know, hey, eventually I'm gonna do SEO, or eventually I'm gonna hire a salesperson, or eventually I'm gonna need some business automation. Then the time comes and you need that thing, but you can't remember who the person was you connected with that has that solution. That happens to everybody. So that's why you need to be constantly producing and creating content, because eventually that person is going to need the solution that you have. And if you didn't show up in the feed that day or send them a newsletter that day, then they might not have ever bought from you just because they don't remember who you are. We meet so many people, we come across so many names. You know, I have 16,000 followers. I think I have 10,000 connections. That's just for reference. How am I supposed to remember all of these names? Your customers are no different. So that's why you have to constantly show up and make sure that it's not only consistency here, it's not 1,000 posts a week. It's more so building in that predictability, not only for you, but also the audience. So you're there when that person is in the exact position to buy from you. And that is the system. That is what you need to be running every single day if you're a B2B service provider. So I hope you enjoyed this breakdown. My name is Ryan Sullivan from Podcast Principles. We're gonna have 2 other videos up on the screen here, or if you're listening on the audio version, we have a myriad of episodes on how to build out your podcast. And finally, the link to book a call with me directly is always in the description of the long-form version of these videos. So I appreciate you tuning in, and I'm gonna see you next week.